My daughter left her 6-year-old son at my door on a cold November morning, one small backpack slung over his shoulder, and a note that said, "Just for the weekend. Mum, I need a break. That was 12 years ago. She never came back. That little boy, Noah, was quiet. Strange and different in ways I didn't understand. He hated noise, couldn't bear a hug, and rocked back and forth like the world around him was too heavy to hold. Everyone told me he'd never live a normal life. They were wrong, because by 16, that same boy had built a program that changed everything, a piece of software that could tell truth from lies, real from fake. A system so powerful that companies fought to buy it, and one of them did, for $3.2 million. The local news called him the autistic genius who sees patterns. No one else can. But what they didn't tell you is that 2 weeks after that story aired, our doorbell rang again. And there she was, my daughter, standing in the doorway with a lawyer, a folder full of documents and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She said, "I never left, Mom. I was there all along. I can prove it. In that moment. Everything I'd built for Noah, every ounce of love, every sleepless night, every piece of proof that I'd raised him alone, was about to be taken away." But then Noah whispered the strangest thing. He said, "Let her talk." I didn't know it then, but that whisper was the beginning of something none of us saw coming, a battle that would test what family really means, and reveal a truth more shocking than any of us were ready for. Before we continue, if you believe family stories can still teach us about love, betrayal, and forgiveness, subscribe to When Family Breaks, because sometimes the stories that heal us the most come from the people who broke us first, now. What did Noah see that day? The detail so small yet powerful enough to destroy every lie. Keep watching, because what happened in that courtroom will change how you see truth, family, and forgiveness forever. I still remember that morning like it happened yesterday. The air smelled of rain and pine. My hands were busy making coffee when the sound of tires crunching gravel broke the quiet. I looked out the kitchen window and saw my daughter's car pulling into the driveway. I hadn't seen Laura in months. For a second, I thought maybe she'd finally come to visit. Maybe she'd stay for breakfast. Then I noticed the small figure in the back seat, and the way she kept her eyes on the steering wheel. Not on me. When I opened the door, Noah stood beside her. A little boy in a red jacket zipped all the way up to his chin, clutching a stuffed turtle that had lost one eye. He was 6, thin, pale and shaking, though it wasn't cold. "Just for the weekend, Mom," Laura said. "I need a break. I'll call Sunday." Her voice had that quick, nervous rhythm she used when she'd already decided something and didn't want to hear an argument. I looked at Noah. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He kept rocking heel to toe, his fingers pressing against his ears as if the world was too loud. "Sweetheart," I said, "why don't you come inside? Grandma made pancakes." He didn't move. I bent down, hoping to help him with his backpack, but Laura stopped me. "He hates to be touched," she whispered. Then louder, "I'll call you, okay?" And before I could say another word, she was halfway to her car. The door slammed. The engine started. Noah's small body stiffened with the sound. She didn't hug him. She didn't even wave. I stood there on the porch holding a coffee cup that had suddenly gone cold, watching her taillights disappear down the wet road. Inside, the house felt enormous and empty. Noah went straight to the living room corner and crouched beside the bookshelf. He hummed softly, a sound low and steady, like a refrigerator motor that never shut off. I tried turning on the cartoon channel he used to like, but he screamed and covered his ears. I turned it off again. The silence that followed was heavier than the noise. Dinner was worse. I cooked chicken nuggets because Laura once told me that was all he would eat. He took one look at the plate and pushed it away. I tried macaroni. He whimpered. I tried applesauce. He turned his face to the wall. Finally, I left a few crackers on the table and walked out of the kitchen. When I came back an hour later, 3 crackers were gone. It felt like a victory. That night I made up the guest room with fresh sheets. "Noah, this is your bed," I said gently. He stood in the doorway, rocking faster, eyes darting from the lamp to the curtain. When I tried to tuck the blanket around him, he screamed so loud it cut through me. Okay, honey, you don't have to," I said, stepping back. He curled up on top of the bed without the blanket, humming that same note until he finally drifted into a restless sleep. I sat outside his room listening to that sound for hours. It wasn't crying. It wasn't singing. It was survival. The weekend turned into a week. Laura didn't call. I left messages. I texted. Nothing. On the 5th night, I dialed again, my voice shaking. "Laura, please, I need to know what he eats, what time he sleeps, what he likes. Please call me." Still nothing. By the 2nd week, I stopped expecting the phone to ring. Instead, I started learning Noah's world. He liked the same breakfast every morning: scrambled eggs, toast cut diagonally, nothing touching on the plate. He wanted the same blue cup every time he drank water. If the route to therapy changed by a single street, he panicked, so I kept everything exactly the same. Every sound, every schedule, every colour. It was exhausting, but it worked. Slowly the humming softened. He still didn't speak, but he looked less afraid. He began lining up his toy cars along the floor, not randomly but by colour, red to orange to yellow to green, each shade blending into the next with impossible precision. When I whispered, "That's beautiful, Noah," he didn't look up, but his rocking slowed, and for the first time I felt he'd heard me. December arrived with early snow. I baked sugar cookies, hoping the smell might make him smile. He sat at the kitchen table, watching the shapes appear on the tray. When the phone rang, I dropped the spatula and grabbed it. "Laura." Her voice was flat. "Mom, I can't do this anymore." "What do you mean?" "He's yours." "Laura, don't, please," but the line went dead. I called back until my hands shook. Voicemail. The cookies burned. Smoke filled the kitchen. I turned off the oven, slid to the floor and just sat there, the blackened tray beside me. I don't know how long I stayed like that. When I looked up, Noah was in the doorway. He watched me for a long moment, then walked to the counter, picked up his blue cup, filled it with water, and placed it beside me on the floor. He didn't say a word, but that small gesture shattered me more than any scream. That night, I promised myself something. I would stop waiting for Laura. I would stop wondering why. The weekend was over, even if she never said so. From that day on, I became Noah's anchor, every morning. The same breakfast, every drive, the same route, every bedtime. The same quiet good night from the doorway because he didn't want me any closer. And little by little, something changed. He began sitting beside me while I read. He stopped covering his ears when I turned on the heater. He even started sleeping through the night. One evening, as I folded laundry, I found his small handprint on the fogged window pane. Just one print, but centered perfectly as if to say, "I'm here now." That was the night I realized the truth I'd been avoiding. This wasn't a weekend. It was a lifetime beginning all over. Again, for both of us. 3 years slipped by before I realized how much the house had changed. It no longer echoed with silence. It breathed with small sounds, Noah's hums, the soft shuffle of his slippers on the hallway floor, the rhythmic clicking of his toy cars as they rolled across the table. He was 9 now. Taller, still quiet, but no longer frightened. His world had patterns, and within those patterns he found peace. Every morning began the same. Scrambled eggs, toast cut corner to corner, and the blue cup of water beside his plate. He'd tap the edge of the cup twice before taking a sip. 2 taps, always 2. If I forgot and poured juice instead, he'd stare at it until I corrected the mistake. Once I understood his rhythm, the days flowed more smoothly. He still didn't speak, not with words. But Noah spoke through patterns, through the way he arranged objects, colours and sounds. His notebooks were filled with lines, dots and tiny hand-drawn symbols. I didn't understand them at first. They looked like a child's scribbles, but when I asked his therapist, she smiled softly and said, "He's tracking his world. Every mark is a record of something that matters to him." That made sense to me. I'd always kept lists. Shopping lists, lesson plans, reminders on sticky notes. Maybe Noah was doing the same thing, just in his own language. One rainy afternoon, I found him on the living room rug surrounded by alphabet magnets. He wasn't spelling words. He was arranging them in neat rows, a line of red letters, then orange, then yellow, each shade blending into the next like a rainbow drawn from memory. I sat quietly, not wanting to interrupt. He looked so focused, so at peace. After a while, he pointed to the line of letters, then to the window where raindrops were sliding down the glass. The sequence on the refrigerator mirrored the rhythm of the rain. A pattern. That was his way of saying, "I hear it too." At school, things were harder. His teachers admired his intelligence, but didn't know how to handle his differences. Group projects terrified him. Lunchrooms were too loud. The principal suggested moving him to a special class, one with fewer students. I'd spent 35 years teaching, and I recognised that tone, kind words hiding low expectations. "He's keeping up academically," I said during the meeting. "He reads above grade level. He does the math in his head." The counsellor folded her hands. "But he doesn't socialise, Mrs. Carter. He avoids eye contact." "He's autistic," I said. Eye contact feels like shouting to him. They exchanged looks that said, "She's just a grandmother. She doesn't understand." When I got home that night, I pulled out his therapy reports, pages of progress notes, assessments and goals, and organised them into a binder with labelled tabs. Noah watched from across the table. "What are you doing?" he asked quietly. It stopped me cold. His voice was higher than I'd imagined, soft but certain. I blinked. "Did you just speak?" He nodded once. "I'm keeping track of your school records," I said. He leaned closer, studying my papers. "The dates are out of order." He was right. His mind saw connections mine didn't. We spent the next hour rearranging every page chronologically. He didn't speak again that night, but he smiled once, the faintest curve of his lips. That was the first time I realised how much order meant to him. Chaos frightened him. Structure calmed him, so I built structure into everything. Fridays became cookie nights. We used the same recipe every time. Noah measured each ingredient with surgical precision, tapping the spoon against the bowl exactly 3 times before levelling it. If I mixed too quickly, he'd stop me. "Wait, count first," and we would 1, 2, 3, then stir. He'd begun drawing symbols in his notebooks, small loops and lines that looked meaningless, until one day I noticed they repeated across pages in a sequence. He was cataloguing moments, the way other kids kept diaries. On the first day of spring, he handed me a page covered in those symbols. I asked, "What's this?" He pointed to a circle with 3 dots in the middle. "Rain." Then to another mark that looked like a square with a smaller square inside. "Home," and a curved line crossing through both. "Together." My eyes filled before I could stop them. It was the first sentence he'd ever written to me. Rain, home, together. From then on, his notebooks became our bridge. I learned to read his symbols, and he began to add letters, slow and shaky, but real. He wrote down the times we ate, the routes we drove, the movies we watched. He called it keeping truth. I didn't understand what that meant, not yet. But he said it like a promise. Mr. Hanson, his new teacher, noticed Noah's obsession with order. Instead of scolding him for organising supplies, he gave him a challenge. "Can you make a system that helps the class track homework?" Noah's eyes lit up. Within a week, he'd designed a chart on the classroom computer that automatically sorted assignments by colour and due date. Mr. Hanson showed it to the principal, who finally admitted that mainstream placement might actually suit him after all. That night, Noah came home and typed for hours on my old laptop. When I asked what he was doing, he said, "Making patterns that talk." He showed me the screen, a simple program that displayed colours and shapes responding to sounds from the microphone. If you clapped, the pattern changed. If you spoke, it pulsed. "It's what sound looks like," he said. I stared, amazed. All the therapy sessions, all the tears, all the years of silence. And now he'd built something that could translate feeling into form. The program didn't look like much, just shifting circles and lines, but I knew I was watching the start of something extraordinary. At bedtime, he hesitated at the door. "Grandma?" "Yes, honey?" He pointed to the blue cup on his nightstand. "Tomorrow, same." "Of course," I said. He nodded, satisfied, then added softly, "Thank you for not changing things." When the lights went out, I sat alone in the kitchen, looking at that blue cup glowing faintly under the nightlight. It wasn't just a cup anymore, it was proof that consistency could be love. I thought of Laura, wherever she was, running from the noise of motherhood that I now lived in every day. I wondered if she'd ever understand what she'd missed, the quiet triumphs, the tiny miracles. As I rinsed the cup for morning, I realised that Noah's patterns weren't just his way of surviving. They were his way of speaking to the world, one code at a time. And somewhere deep down, I sensed that these patterns would one day speak louder than any voice, louder even than the mother who'd once walked away. By the time Noah turned 12, our home had become a map of routines. Each room held its own rhythm. The kitchen smelled of toast and morning calm. The hallway lights flicked on at exactly 7:15, and his blue cup always sat waiting by the sink. Stability was our language, one we both spoke fluently. But that spring something shifted. Noah began asking questions that didn't sound like a child's questions at all. "Can truth disappear if people want it to?" he asked one night while I was washing dishes. I thought I'd misheard him. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" He was sitting at the table, his notebook open, pencil moving in quick, tight lines. "If something really happened, but no one writes it down, does it stop being real?" I turned off the water. The only sound was the slow ticking of the kitchen clock. "No," I said softly. "It's still real." He looked up then, eyes too serious for 12. "But how can anyone prove it?" That question followed me for weeks. I didn't realise it was the beginning of something bigger, something only he could have created. A few days later, I noticed him scanning old photos with my printer. He'd found the box I kept in the hall closet, pictures of birthdays, receipts, even grocery lists I'd saved for no reason other than habit. He was feeding each one into the scanner, labelling them with dates and tiny notes. "What are you doing?" I asked, half amused. "Keeping proof," he said without looking up. "Proof of what?" "That we were here." There was no arguing with that. He moved like a scientist cataloguing fossils, careful, precise, reverent. He even started scanning my old calendars, the ones filled with tiny squares of handwriting. On November 14th, 2011, he pointed to a line that said Laura dropped off Noah for the weekend. He tapped it twice. "This is where everything changed," he said quietly. It sent a shiver through me. He wasn't just remembering. He was preserving. Within weeks, he'd filled folders on his laptop labelled medical, school, therapy, photos, receipts. Each file had subfolders, cross-referenced with dates and notes. He'd designed an index that linked one document to another. When I asked how he knew what to do, he said, "It's all patterns. Everything connects if you look long enough." He called it the Proof Project. One evening I found him sitting in the dark, screen glow reflecting on his face. "Grandma," he said suddenly, "why did Mom leave?" The question hit like a slap. He hadn't said her name in years. I sat down beside him. "She thought she couldn't handle your needs, honey. Some people, they get scared of what they don't understand." He looked at the screen. not me. Did she ever send money? I hesitated. No. Did she ever call? I shook my head. He typed something on his keyboard, then whispered, "Okay." That was all. But from that night on, he began scanning faster. Bank statements, phone bills, anything that told the story of our life together. It was as if he needed the evidence to exist, so the world could never rewrite what happened. At therapy the next week, Dr. Lin told me, he's trying to make sense of absence. He's building a structure around what he lost. I asked, "Is that healthy?" She smiled gently. "It's brilliant. Let him build it." So I did. Summer came and Noah spent most of it in his room with the old laptop I'd given him. I thought he was just organising files, until one afternoon he called me in. "Watch this," he said. On the screen was a simple folder marked Proof Prototype. He clicked it and dozens of boxes appeared, each labelled with dates, colours and strings of numbers. He clicked another file, and the system highlighted connections, receipts that matched calendar entries, photos that aligned with therapy appointments. "What is this?" I asked. "A timeline," he said. "It shows what's real. It shows everything." I stared at the display. Every time I doubted myself as a parent, every time I wondered if I'd done enough, there it was, proof that I had. The groceries, the doctor visits, the report cards, all of it arranged into perfect order. "You made this all by yourself?" He nodded. "If someone lies, this will catch them." I didn't know then how literal that statement would become. A few weeks later, I overheard him talking during his therapy session, voice low but steady. "If Mom ever comes back, she might say things that aren't true. I'll need to show what really happened," the therapist asked gently. "Why is that important to you?" He paused. Because truth should never fade. When he came home, I asked if he wanted dinner early. He just said later and went to his room. The sound of typing filled the house until midnight. I peeked in once. 3 screens open, code, files, data scrolling faster than I could follow. He was building a digital fortress made of facts. That autumn, the leaves turned gold and our house felt different. Noah smiled more. He still avoided crowds, but he'd started taking walks with me after dinner, sometimes pointing out how the streetlights flickered in repeating sequences. "Every system leaves a fingerprint," he told me one night. "Even lies." I stopped walking. "Lies have fingerprints?" He nodded as if it were obvious. "You just have to know where to look." He didn't say much else, but his eyes had that look, the look he got before creating something extraordinary. One afternoon, I came home to find my old photo albums stacked neatly on the table. Every page had sticky notes attached, small observations, timestamps, even GPS data he'd extracted from the image files. He'd turned our memories into evidence. "Why are you doing all this, Noah?" I asked again. He hesitated, then said, "Because one day someone might say we don't belong to each other." My throat tightened. "And what will this project do?" He looked at me then, with the calm certainty that always unnerved me. "It will remind the world what really happened. That night, I dreamed of boxes filled with light, each one holding a moment from our life, shining so no one could ever dim it. When I woke, Noah was at his desk, asleep on his arms, the glow of his laptop still reflecting off the walls. I covered him with a blanket and saw the words on his screen. Proof is love that remembers. It was then I realised his project wasn't just about technology. It was his way of holding on, to truth to me, to everything he was afraid might vanish. And though I didn't know it yet, the Proof project would soon become the weapon that saved us both. By the time Noah turned 15, the quiet boy who once hid from sound had turned his silence into a language the world could no longer ignore. He spent hours at his desk, surrounded by the hum of computers, the faint click of keys, and the glow of 3 monitors that made his room look like another universe. He was still my Noah, gentle, careful, bound by his routines, But something in him had changed. His mind had outgrown the small world I'd built to protect him. One afternoon, I found him in the kitchen staring at my old laptop. It was slow, ancient, barely alive. "Grandma," he said, "do you know what coding is? Like secret messages?" I guessed. He shook his head. "It's how computers talk." That night he borrowed the laptop. By morning he'd filled it with lines of strange symbols and brackets. "What are you doing with all that?" I asked, pouring coffee. "Learning Python," he said. "It's a programming language. Did someone teach you?" "No, the internet did." He said it so casually, as if learning an entire language overnight was nothing. But to me it was a miracle. Within weeks, the Proof project, the system he'd been building for years, started transforming into something else. He added layers of code, algorithms that compared timestamps and analysed digital fingerprints. He told me, "The world hides lies in data. I want to make something that finds them." I didn't fully understand what he meant, but I recognised the look in his eyes, the same fierce concentration he'd had when he was a child, aligning his toy cars by colour. The difference was that now, those colours had become code. He called his new creation Verify Chain. Every evening, I'd bring him dinner, and he'd eat while still typing, his blue cup beside the keyboard, half full of water gone warm. Sometimes he'd look up at me and explain what he was doing, speaking faster than I could follow. "If a document is real, its metadata matches the timeline. If someone edits it, even 1 pixel, I'll know." I smiled and said, "Sounds like magic." He shook his head. "No, Grandma, just math." By winter, Verify Chain was more than a school project. It was functional software. He could upload a document, run it through his program, and it would tell him whether it had ever been changed, when, and by whom. When I told his therapist, she was speechless. "He built that?" "At 15? Yes," I said. "In his bedroom." She smiled softly. "He doesn't just see the world differently. He sees through it." I didn't realise then how prophetic that was. One afternoon in early spring, Noah came into the living room carrying his laptop. "I want to show you something." I sat on the couch, expecting another math app or coding trick. Instead, he opened a document, a scanned copy of one of my old bank statements from 2013. "Watch," he said. He ran it through his software, and within seconds, a series of numbers filled the screen. "This is the document's signature," he explained. "Every file has one, like a fingerprint." Then he changed a single word in the document and ran it again. "The numbers changed instantly. Now it's different," he said. "See? It proves if someone tries to fake something." I stared at him, at his steady hands, his calm voice, his absolute certainty. It was the same boy who once screamed at the sound of the dishwasher, the same boy who once couldn't say a single word. I whispered, "You made this." He nodded. "Why?" He looked at me with quiet intensity. "Because people lie, but data doesn't." That night I sat awake thinking about what he'd said. He wasn't just building a program, he was building armour. The following summer, he sent emails to small cybersecurity firms explaining his software and offering free trials. I helped him polish the letters, though his writing was already more professional than mine had ever been. At first, no one replied. Then, in June, one company wrote back. They tested Verify Chain, found it flawless, and asked to buy a license. The payment came through a week later, $20,000. I nearly dropped the phone when I saw the number. He shrugged. "It's just a start." The next month brought more offers. Startups wanted demos. Journalists wanted interviews. He refused most of them, except one, a local reporter named Dana. She arrived one afternoon, polite and smiling, notebook in hand. "Noah," she said, "how does it feel to be a 15-year-old creating technology that could change cybersecurity?" He blinked. "It's just pattern recognition. Where did you learn to do all this?" He hesitated, then said, "From watching people." She laughed softly. "Watching? People have patterns too," he said. "When they lie, their words change shape." The interview aired on a Friday evening. Teen tech prodigy creates revolutionary verification software. They showed clips of him typing, focused and calm, his face lit by the soft glow of his screens. They used the words autistic genius. Neighbours stopped me in the grocery store to congratulate us. Friends I hadn't spoken to in years sent messages. But Noah didn't seem to care. He just went back to work, quieter than before. 2 weeks later, the doorbell rang. I was folding laundry when I heard it. 3 sharp chimes, too quick to be the mailman. I opened the door and my heart froze. Laura stood there. Her hair was perfectly styled, her suit expensive, her perfume sharp and unfamiliar. Beside her stood a man in a dark suit holding a leather briefcase. She smiled, but it wasn't the smile I remembered. "Hi, Mom," she said softly. My throat went dry. "Laura?" She looked past me into the house. "Is he here?" Before I could answer, the man stepped forward. "I'm Daniel Roberts, representing Ms. Laura Carter. We'd like to discuss custody and financial guardianship regarding Noah." "Custody?" I whispered. "He's 15. Laura's expression was smooth, almost rehearsed. "I never gave up my parental rights. I've been supporting him all these years, sending money, keeping in touch. I have records. My knees nearly gave out." The lawyer opened his briefcase and pulled out documents, bank statements, letters, visitation logs. Each one stamped, notarized, official looking. "These can't be real," I said. He smiled politely. "They are." And then Laura added, "I just want to be part of my son's life again. Especially now, with his success. He needs guidance." Before I could speak, a calm voice came from behind me. "Let her talk." Noah stood in the hallway, his face unreadable. He didn't look angry or afraid, just observant. Laura blinked. "Sweetheart." He didn't answer. I turned toward him, terrified. "Noah, she's..." But he just repeated, "Let her talk." I didn't know what he meant. Not yet, but as I looked into his steady eyes, a chill ran through me, somewhere in that silence. I realized my grandson wasn't scared. He was waiting for her to say one word too many, and that was when I understood. This time, the patterns were hers, and he was already seeing through them. The I. Following week passed like a storm we couldn't escape. Laura's lawyer filed a formal petition for custody and financial guardianship. I hadn't set foot in a courtroom since my teaching days when I'd testify on behalf of students. But this time it wasn't about a child in my class. It was about my grandson, my whole world. The morning of our first meeting, I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by years of binders, therapy records, report cards, medical bills, school evaluations. Every piece of paper I'd kept, every note I'd ever written about Noah. I thought it would be enough. It wasn't. Our attorney, Linda Morales, was a kind woman in her 50s, sharp and direct, but with eyes that softened when she looked at Noah. She spent hours flipping through my folders. When she finally closed the last one, she sighed. "You have excellent records," she said. "But Mrs. Carter, you never filed for legal guardianship." I frowned. "She abandoned him. What else did I need?" Linda looked pained. "You needed paperwork." "Without it, her parental rights remain intact." My chest tightened. "You mean she can take him?" "She's not asking for physical custody," Linda said carefully. "Just control of his assets until he's 18. I stared at her. "That's 2 years," she nodded, "and $3.2 million. That night, I sat at the kitchen table long after Noah had gone to bed. The clock ticked in the silence. I thought about how she'd left him with nothing but a backpack, how she hadn't called for 11 years, how she'd missed every birthday, every doctor's visit, every therapy session, and now she wanted his future. I was still there when Noah came out of his room, his hair messy, eyes half asleep, "Grandma," he said quietly, "you should sleep." "I can't," I whispered. "We might lose everything." He didn't answer. He just placed his hand on the edge of the table, close enough for me to feel it, not touching, but steady. Then in his calm, certain voice he said, "Let her talk." I didn't understand then, but I would. 2 weeks later, we sat in the conference room at her lawyer's office for the deposition. The walls were lined with law books that looked untouched. Laura was already there when we arrived, dressed in soft grey, her hair perfect. She looked like a woman who'd spent 11 years rehearsing this moment. When she saw Noah, her eyes filled with practiced emotion. "You've grown so much," she said. He gave no response. Just sat down beside me, silent, observing. Her lawyer began smoothly. "Ms. Carter, can you describe your involvement in Noah's life?" Laura smiled almost tenderly. "I've always been involved. I visited when I could, sent money for his care, called regularly to check on him. My hands clenched under the table. Lies, polished, measured lies. She spoke in perfect detail. December 2012, I sent $200 for Christmas. March 2014, I visited for his birthday. May 2017, $500 for therapy expenses." Each date came out like a confession rehearsed for sympathy. Linda leaned toward me and whispered, "Don't react." I bit my lip until I tasted blood. When it was my turn, I told the truth. She left him when he was 6. She never called, never sent money. I raised him alone. Laura shook her head with just the right amount of sadness. "Mum, maybe you just don't remember." "I have the receipts." Her lawyer handed over a stack of papers, bank slips, call logs, signed letters. They looked real. Too real. Linda studied them, her brow furrowing. "Where did you get these?" "They're from my records," Laura said sweetly. I looked at Noah. His expression didn't change, but I could see something working behind his eyes. Calculation. Quiet recognition. Afterward, Linda drove us home. "We'll need time," she said. "If those documents are forged, we'll have to prove it." "But how?" I asked. "They look real." "I'll bring in a forensic analyst, but it won't be easy." Noah was silent the whole drive. When we got home, he went straight to his room. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 3 in the morning, I saw the light under his door. I opened it quietly. He was at his computer, 3 monitors glowing, fingers moving across the keyboard in a rhythm that sounded almost like breathing. "Noah," I whispered. "You need to rest. We have court tomorrow." He didn't turn around. "Almost done." "Done with what?" He paused, his voice calm. "My records." I stepped closer. His screens showed spreadsheets, graphs, documents, all labelled, dated, cross-referenced. I recognised our bank statements, phone bills, calendars, everything he'd ever scanned. "What are you doing?" "Showing what's real," he said softly. I stood there, heart pounding, not understanding but trusting him. There was something in his stillness, an unshakable certainty that made me feel, for the first time in weeks, that maybe we weren't as powerless as I thought. The next morning, the courthouse smelled of old wood and polish. The walls echoed with whispers and footsteps. I sat beside Noah, my palms sweating, while Laura and her lawyer took their seats across from us. The judge, a woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, entered and began the hearing. Laura's lawyer spoke first, his voice smooth, practiced. "Your Honour, my client, Ms. Carter, has maintained parental rights and consistent involvement in her son's life. She presents verified financial and communication records as proof." He laid the documents on the table. They looked official, embossed stamps, dated signatures. The judge nodded. "Mrs. Carter, you may proceed." Linda stood. "Your Honour, these claims are false. My client raised Noah single-handedly after his mother abandoned him at 6 years old. We have years of school and therapy records." The judge looked sympathetic but uncertain. "Do you have legal guardianship papers?" "No." Linda said quietly, because she never thought she'd need them. That's when Laura took the stand. Her performance was flawless, voice trembling in all the right places, hands folded demurely. I never stopped being his mother, she said tearfully. I just wanted what was best for him. When she finished, the judge turned to me. Mrs. Carter, do you wish to respond? I stood, my voice shaking. She left him 11 years ago. No calls, no letters, no money. I have nothing but the truth, the judge nodded slowly. Without hard evidence disproving her documents, I can't dismiss her claim yet. My chest caved in. I turned to Noah, whispering, We're losing. But he looked calm. Completely calm. The judge said, Young man, do you wish to say anything? He stood. Yes, Your Honour, I have evidence. The courtroom fell silent. He walked to the front, laptop bag in hand, and asked to connect it to the courtroom monitor. The judge hesitated, then nodded. When the screen lit up, he said clearly, My name is Noah Carter. I built a verification system that detects document forgery through metadata analysis. It's the same software I sold to Anderson Security last year. Gasps rippled through the room. He opened Laura's supposed financial records on the screen. These documents claim to be from 2012 through 2017, but the metadata shows they were all created 6 weeks ago, right after the news about my software aired. Numbers appeared on the display, timestamps. Digital fingerprints, he clicked again. Here are my grandmother's bank records from those years. No deposits from Laura Carter. Not one. Laura's face went pale. Her lawyer stammered. Objection. Overruled, the judge said softly. Noah continued, voice steady. Here are phone logs from 2010 to now. 0 calls from her number, and my grandmother's calendars, photos and therapy receipts all confirm the same thing. She was gone. He turned to the judge. She didn't just lie. She forged it. The judge studied the screen for a long moment. Then she said quietly, Ms. Carter, do you have an explanation? Laura's voice cracked. It must be a mistake. Maybe my lawyer. But the truth was already on the screen. For a boy who had once spoken in patterns, he had just spoken the purest truth there was. And as the courtroom sat in stunned silence, I realized something else. This wasn't just the trial of 2 truths. It was the moment Noah proved that truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to be seen. The courtroom emptied slowly, as if no one wanted to be the first to break the silence that followed Noah's final words. The truth, cold, undeniable, shining across that courtroom screen, had left everyone speechless. The judge's ruling came swiftly, her voice steady, almost gentle. Full custody and guardianship are awarded to Mrs. Evelyn Carter. Furthermore, the court refers this matter to the district attorney for investigation of document fraud and perjury. The gavel struck once, echoing like thunder. It was over. Laura's face drained of colour. Her lawyer muttered something about appeals, but even he knew it was hopeless. Noah's proof was irrefutable, clean, perfect. The very thing she'd tried to steal had become the weapon that exposed her. Outside, the sunlight hit us both like a blessing. I stood on the courthouse steps with my grandson beside me, the same boy who once couldn't bear to be touched, now standing tall, shoulders squared, calm as stone. For a moment I couldn't move. I just stared at him, realizing what he'd done, not just for himself but for me. You knew, didn't you? I whispered. He nodded once. I was ready. The reporters swarmed, cameras flashing, but Noah didn't flinch. He gave no interviews, no statements. When one asked how it felt to expose his mother, he simply said, Truth doesn't need to feel anything. That night, the house was quiet again. Not the kind of quiet that hurts, but the kind that heals. I made his favourite dinner, eggs and toast, even though it was far past breakfast time. He ate in silence, methodically, then looked up and said, Can I start something new? I smiled. Another programme? He nodded, but not like before. This one won't be about catching lies. It'll be about helping people like me find work. And that's how it began. Within months, Noah launched a small company from our living room. He called it Patternworks. His mission was simple: to hire autistic programmers, testers, and analysts who saw the world differently. People like me, he said, see mistakes others miss. His first hire was Stephen, a man in his late 20s who'd been one of my students years ago. Stephen had struggled terribly with social interaction and spent his school years being told he'd never hold a job. When I saw his name on Noah's list, I almost cried. "Stephen Jacobs?" I asked. "From my 4th grade class?" Noah nodded. "You helped him once. I'm just giving him a place to belong." By summer, there were 5 employees, all of them on the spectrum, all of them brilliant. They worked in perfect quiet, headphones on, communicating through shared documents and short-typed messages. Noah called it orderly collaboration. The company grew fast. Tech firms noticed how accurate their work was. They started outsourcing testing projects to Patternworks. For the first time, Noah was managing others, not just data. One afternoon, I visited his small rented office downtown. The walls were plain, the desks minimal, but the energy was calm, focused. Stephen saw me and smiled shyly. "Mrs. Carter," he said, "you once told me I wasn't broken, just different." His voice trembled. "Noah says that too." I couldn't speak. I just touched my chest, hoping he understood how much that meant. Noah's name started circulating again, this time not as the boy who built million-dollar software, but as the young man creating opportunities for others who'd been underestimated. He hated the attention, but accepted the work. "It's not about me," he said. "It's about showing that difference isn't a defect." 6 months after the trial, we got news that Laura had accepted a plea deal. 2 years probation and 500 hours of community service at an autism resource centre. I didn't know how to feel, relieved, angry, exhausted, maybe all at once. A few months later, I dropped off donated supplies at that same centre. I hadn't planned to see her, but fate has its own timing. She was sitting on the floor, surrounded by children, non-verbal, restless, some humming softly the way Noah used to. She was reading to them, her voice calm and gentle. When she looked up, our eyes met. She froze. I did too. Her face looked older, softer, stripped of the polish she used to hide behind. There was no anger there, just regret. The director walked by and said quietly, "That volunteer comes in early and stays late. Says she's trying to learn what she should have learned years ago." I didn't speak to her. I didn't need to. Sometimes forgiveness doesn't need words. It just needs time. That evening, I brought dinner to Noah's apartment. His blue cup, the same one he'd used since he was 6, sat on the counter, chipped but still whole. We ate quietly like we always had. The rhythm of our lives hadn't changed, just deepened. After dinner, he looked at me, hands folded neatly on the table. "Grandma," he said softly, "I know what you gave up." I blinked. "What do you mean?" He looked down. "Your friends, your trips, your time. I heard you once turning down a trip with your old school friends because you couldn't leave me." His voice was calm but heavy. "You could have sent me away." "You didn't," I swallowed hard. "You're my grandson, Noah," he nodded. "But you chose it every day, even when I couldn't say thank you." For a long moment there was only silence, the kind that wraps around you like a blanket. Finally, I reached across the table, hand hovering close to his. Not touching, but near enough that he could feel it if he wanted. "You were worth it," I said. "Every single day." He looked up then, eyes steady and sure. "I know that now." When I stood to leave, he was already opening his laptop again, fingers poised above the keys, ready to build something new. Same routine. Same rhythm. Same quiet miracle that had carried us this far. At the door, I turned back. "See you Tuesday," he nodded. Tuesday. Driving home, the city lights blurred through my windshield like tiny constellations. Every street, every turn, followed the route we'd driven 1,000 times. The one he'd memorized, the one he said felt safe. Halfway home, my phone buzzed with a message. From Noah, 2 words. "Thank you." I smiled. The kind of smile that comes from deep inside, where love and exhaustion and peace all meet. For years, I'd wondered if the story of our family would ever find a happy ending. But maybe there are no endings, just quieter chapters after the storms. And as I turned into the driveway, headlights sweeping across the front porch where it had all begun, I realized something simple and true. The long way home isn't measured in miles. It's measured in forgiveness, in patience, in choosing love. Again and again, no matter how late the hour or how heavy the road. And somehow, after everything, we'd finally made it home. When I look back now, I often wonder what part of our story moved people the most. Was it the betrayal? The courtroom drama? Or was it simply a boy's quiet, stubborn belief that truth can survive anything, if you love it enough to protect it? As a grandmother, and as someone who's spent her whole life around children, I've learned something most of us forget. The way a child's mind processes love is rarely the way we expect. Some children crave touch. Others, like Noah, crave structure, silence, and proof that the world won't disappear when they close their eyes. People often tell me, "You're so strong for what you did," but the truth is, I wasn't strong. I was terrified, lonely, and angry for years. Strength didn't arrive as courage. It came as commitment. A decision to show up again tomorrow, even when today broke me. If you've ever loved someone who was hard to love, you'll understand. You don't love them because it's easy. You love them because they're yours, and that's what family is supposed to mean. Noah's story isn't just about a genius who built software that exposed lies. It's about a child who found truth in patterns when people couldn't give him honesty in words. It's about the quiet resilience that blooms in the most unexpected hearts. I still visit him every Tuesday, the same dinner, the same route home. That rhythm has become the sound of peace to me, and sometimes, when I see the light under his apartment door, I know he's still working, still building something the world doesn't yet understand. Maybe that's how healing works. You don't always get the apology you deserve. You don't always get back what you lost. But if you're lucky, you get clarity, and that's enough. So, if you've ever been hurt by someone you love, I want you to remember this. Forgiveness doesn't mean you forget. It means you finally stop letting their choices define your peace. And maybe, like Noah and me, you'll find that the long way home, the one filled with detours, heartache, and waiting, is still a road worth walking. Because somewhere along that road, the pain you carried turns into understanding, and the family that broke you might just be the one that teaches you how to heal. Before you go, if this story touched something inside you, I'd love for you to join our community here on When Family Breaks. Subscribe, so you don't miss the next story that reminds us we're not alone in our scars, and tell me in the comments. If you were in my place, could you forgive your own child? Could you love them again, knowing what they did? I'll be reading your words, because every story of forgiveness begins with someone brave enough to share it.